Have you ever heard of British convicts being transported from Britain to America and Australia? From 1615 to 1868, British convicts were being transported to America and Australia in convict ships. Crime rates in Britain were skyrocketing and people were committing crimes like petty theft, violence, and treason. As a result of all of this, prisons were becoming overcrowded and Britain had to come up with an alternate form of punishment. This is what led to the idea of transporting convicts on ships to different countries to serve their sentences. How did Britain's overcrowding start? Britain's overcrowding had begun when they would give out ridiculously long sentences when they committed a small crime. For example, stealing a piece of bread or stealing a handkerchief could get you years in prison or even executed. After giving out very severe punishments to adults and children, prisons were filled to the brim with people facing life or death. Prisons were dungeons, so it was dark, cold, unventilated, and claustrophobic. Prisons in the 1600s were also unsanitary, harsh, and inhumane. Prisons had diseases like typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, smallpox, and the Black Plague. The prisons also had little to no regard for human life. To try and fix the overcrowding problem, Britain would try and send prisoners over to American colonies. It worked, but after some time, America gained its independence and they decided to stop allowing convict ships through their ports. Britain then decided to make prisons on the sea, but it failed because it was unhygienic, overcrowded, and had many different diseases. King James. Who started the idea of transporting convicts? The concept of transporting convicts was started by a man named King James. King James began sending convicts in 1615 to the American colonies. Even though King James died on May 25, 1625, the transporting of convicts continued until 1775, with over 52,000 convicts being transported from Britain to America. Life in America for convicts. In the American colonies, life was not good for the convicts. They had to go through what people did in regular prisons, but worse. The conditions of the ships were horrible, and the ships were overcrowded. The first ship, the Taloy, carried 94 convicts. It may seem small, but over time, it would go on to carry 1,500 people. This also included those who weren't convicts. Once convicts landed in America, they would often get separated from any family member, chained up, and sold as indentured servants. Once the convicts were sold, they would do work like agricultural labor, construction work, domestic service, mining, clearing land in extreme weather conditions, and skilled trade. Convict workers would work in harsh and grueling conditions, usually from dusk to dawn, 6 days of the week, and would not get any holiday breaks unless it was a major holiday. America stops allowing convicts. After sending in convicts for over 100 years, something happened. In Maryland, around the 1750s, they stopped allowing convict ships through its ports. During this time, Maryland and Virginia were the colonies that got the most convicts. At the time, Virginia had roughly 20,000 convicts from Britain, while Maryland had roughly 60,000. Britain had decided to send most of its convicts to Virginia and Maryland because both of the colonies had economics centered around tobacco plantations, which required a steady workforce. Secondly, Maryland and Virginia were major ports in the transatlantic trade. Ships carrying goods from Britain could easily transport convicts on the return journey without making significant detours. Lastly, the other colonies did not like the idea of convict labor and had economies that did not rely on large-scale agriculture. After a while, Maryland and the other colonies said they did not want to accept convicts through their ports. However, at this time, America was still being colonized, so Britain reopened the ports until 1775, when America and Britain went into the Revolutionary War and the colonies refused a ship with convicts through its ports. What did Britain do next? After America seceded from Great Britain and declared its independence in 1776, Britain saw a solution for its convicts. As a result, they decided to send them to Australia. The first fleet had 11 ships and set sail for Australia between 1786 and 1788. Carrying approximately 775 convicts, Britain continued to transport convicts to Australia up until 1868. The reason Britain sent convicts to Australia was the same as America. The main reason was that prisons were overcrowded, and the second reason was because they wanted to colonize Australia and take control before other countries like France. So why did convicts stop coming to Australia? Convicts stopped coming to Australia for several reasons. The first was that the settlers did not want convicts in Australia. Secondly, Britain decided to change and saw transporting convicts as inhumane and decided to improve prisons. Lastly, transporting prisoners was becoming costly and Britain did not find it necessary.